The Architecture of the Operating System of Mind by Venerable Rungruang Papasaro, Dr. Rungruang Lim Chu Patipa. In principle, the goal of Buddhist study on the mind and its functions is to gain the knowledge of the operating system of mind in terms of the process of dependent origination. This is the core knowledge to have a full understanding on the mind functions, and then to develop the kind of instructed cognition to correct the dysfunction of mind processing, so that the mind will be wholesome all the times. The Buddha explained that if we could resolve the arising problems in the process of dependent origination, then the mind could be liberated from any problem in the world, and this was a special technique of the Buddhism to make an end of suffering in life. In order to understand the knowledge for the destruction of the taints, it is very important to have clear understanding of the details of mind processing of the operating system of mind in terms of the process of dependent origination as follows. All beings are in suffering due to the assumption of the existence of self. It starts when encountering with the world at the sixth sense basis. There are the stimuli of name and form in the world as the external sixth sense basis, and the specific sensory organs of the internal sixth sense basis that receive each type of stimulus from the world. Once there is a contact of stimulus with the associated sensory organ of internal sixth sense basis, the mind processing begins. In dependence upon contact, there is the sixth consciousness at the sixth sense basis. Independent on the eye and forms, eye consciousness arises, also applicable to the other sixth sense basis, including independent on the ear and sounds, ear consciousness arises. Independent on the nose and odors, nose consciousness arises. Independent on the tongue and taste, tongue consciousness arises. Independent on the body and tactile objects, body consciousness arises. Independent on the mind and mental phenomena, mind consciousness arises. Ear, nose, tongue, body, mind are sensory organs that interface between life and the world by having acknowledgement of the arriving of stimuli from the world. The signal processing starts mind processing at the sixth sense bases in each channels. In dependence upon the interface with the world, there is feeling in the process of dependent origination. A person with an uninstructed cognition without learning the truths of life within nature will feel bodily feeling first, and then assuming a self to have a second feeling on mental feeling again, while a noble disciple with instructed insight will have only the bodily feeling, but no mental feeling. In dependence upon feeling, there is the craving in the process of dependent origination, which is the origin of the taint on sensual pleasure. In dependence upon craving, there is pursuit. In dependence upon pursuit, there is gain. In dependence upon gain, there is decision-making. In dependence upon decision-making, there is desire and lust. In dependence upon desire and lust, there is attachment on the five aggregates subject to clinging in the process of dependent origination. From now on, no matter whatever the mind processing may be, it will be associated with the delusional self of which the mind is fully developed to be the taint on existence at this stage. In dependence upon attachment, clinging, there is possessiveness. In dependence upon possessiveness, there is becoming to existence in the process of dependent origination. The birth in the process of dependent origination, the aging and death in the process of dependent origination, whatsoever the object of consciousness, or the signal processing, or the release of neurotransmitters, or mental phenomenon happening inside the mind will arise and fade away within a short period. The fact is that it is impermanent, deteriorating, and no self. In dependence upon aging and death, there is niggardliness, ignorance of the fact that the object of consciousness has already faded away. Those who do not know the truths of life within nature, that is, life is no self, so-called ignorance. Those who understand the truths of life within nature as the banishment of ignorance. Although the object of consciousness has already faded away, but due to the ignorance associated with the niggardliness of the five aggregate subject clinging, the mind establishes the consciousness with the production of new object of consciousness for future renewed existence, and the mind acts as the source of internal name and form. In dependence upon ignorance, there is volitional formations in the process of dependent origination. In dependence upon volitional formations, there is consciousness in the process of dependent origination, as the internal source of the new production of the object of consciousness to flow within the mind. In dependence upon consciousness, there is internal name and form in the process of dependent origination. The internal name and form is sort of signal reflowing within the mind processing in the process of dependent origination. After the first round of the process of dependent origination, The volitional formations of thinking generate the varieties of unwholesome thoughts to drive the mind processing in the next round of the process of dependent origination. The unwholesome thoughts are the middle defilements of the 5 lower fetters, namely sensual desire, ill will, depression, anxiety, and doubt. As the process of dependent origination continues in many rounds of various volitional formations, and then the 5 lower fetters are aggravated into the rough defilements with greed, hatred, and delusion. Any action in responding to the world associated with greed, hatred, and delusion is evil doing which will lead to sorrow, lamentation, pain, dejection, and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering in life. Therefore, it is very important to complete the study for the truths of life within nature by the threefold study strategy, namely the morality, the mind, and the wisdom development. By performing the Buddhist practice, when encountering with the world at the 6th sense basis, while the sense consciousness arises at the 6th sense basis, then establishing mindfulness in the present moment to undertake the restraint at the sense faculties by not grasping at its signs and features, and then to abandon arising unwholesome inside the mind. After being able to abandon all the unwholesome thoughts of the 5 lower fetters, the mind will become internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated. This is then called a master of the courses of thought. He will think whatever thought he wishes to think, and he will not think any thought that he does not wish to think. Dependent on establishing mindfulness to abandon all the unwholesome thoughts arises gladness. Dependent on gladness arises rapture. Dependent on rapture arises bodily and mind relaxations, seclusions. Dependent on bodily and mind relaxations, seclusions, arises happiness. Dependent on happiness arises the right concentration, one-pointedness on mindfulness. Dependent on the right concentration arises insight, observation on the 4 mindfulness foundations. Dependent on insight arises the knowledge of the process of dependent origination. By applying the 4 noble truths on each mental phenomenon, and analyze the whole system of the process of dependent origination. Dependent on the process of dependent origination arises the knowledge for the destruction of the taints. This is the path and way to enlightenment to gain the knowledge of the destruction of the taints. Those are the disenchantment and dispassion to the world for the destruction of the taint for sensual pleasure at craving of the process of dependent origination. The release of the 5 aggregates subject to clinging for the destruction of the taint for existence at clinging of the process of dependent origination. The 4 noble truths for the destruction of the taint for ignorance at ignorance of the process of dependent origination. The assumption of self is delusional belief, as it turns out to drive the process of dependent origination in the direction to be unwholesome thoughts cauterized the self with greed and hatred. With the development of instructed cognition, knowledge of Dharma, then whenever the mind becomes unwholesome, the mind will establishing mindfulness with a proper Dharma to abandon such the arising unwholesome mind, and then the mind will be liberated from such unwholesome by wisdom. Dependent on the knowledge for the destruction of the taints arise liberation. This is the Dharma of the wisdom to liberate the mind. In Buddhism, this is the way to break the process of dependent origination, and to complete the noble search to purify the mind by the destructions of all kinds of defilements, and to make an end of suffering in life.